Hey guys, what's up? So I'm joined here by my buddy Hayden. Hayden is an accomplished card gamer coming from Hayden, what kind of card games have you played?
I've played a lot of Magic, played a lot of Hearthstone, and I ended up meeting you in Gwent.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Going back in the day. But basically, as accomplished as he is, Hayden has actually been playing, Runeterra for the past week and has still been kind of like feeling very uncomfortable on the mulligans, which is, a very, very, very common question. Maybe the single most question I get asked, apart from what's the best deck, is how do you mulligan? And there's no really simple, it's hard to give like tips for. It's just a lot easier to kind of show examples and talk about it. So for this, we're just going to go through a bunch of common decks. We're going to be pretending that our AI opponent is playing some common meta decks, and we're going to be talking about mulligan logic to help everyone understand mulligans a lot better. Sound good, Hayden?
Yeah, sounds great, man. Let's do that.
Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and start off with something pretty simple. Let's start with Bannerman. Bannerman's probably like the most simple mulligans overall. We're going to be having, very simple Bannerman list. And basically, I'm going to try to like pick mulligans that I think will be a little bit trickier to do in terms of like what the opponent will be playing. But again, we'll start off fairly straightforward. Bannerman doesn't really have to mulligan very reactively. So what do you, basically without even looking at the opponent's deck, what would you think about this mulligan?
Thinking about mulligans in this deck, I want to prioritize having an early drop going first in order to maintain some tempo. A really big thing about this deck is board control, so the cards I kind of prioritize are cards like Fiora and Laurent Protege, cards that can help me control the board and also the spells.
Yeah.
Though the thing that I'm having issues with a lot is a combination of like when to keep creatures with spells, what spells to keep, etc., because of how the mana refreshing system works in the game.
Yeah, and that's going to be pretty matchup dependent. I would say, like, right now with this hand, this is a pretty no-brainer hand. This is, like, the simplest we could have possibly started out.
Yeah, it looks pretty simple.
Yeah, and in an average matchup, you would just kick the Garen and keep the three others. If it was something like maybe a Demacia Bannerman Mirror, you could definitely think about keeping the Garen. It's like some just like beef card that's going to come out on 5, especially since you're attacking on odds. But this is kind of like, this is the simplest we could have possibly started. We're going to get into much more complex situations later. But basically, the rule of thumb when you're mulliganing, I think first step is like, look at the opponent's deck, and you're very familiar with that, Hayden. You always want to be looking at the opponent's deck basically before you're even thinking about what cards you want to kick. You want to be identifying, okay, here's the opponent's deck. And then on top of that, we're thinking, okay, who's faster, who's slower, or, who's the beatdown, as people like to say. And if your win condition is to try to kill them before they come online, then we need to be going very early. But if we're just kind of like looking for late game beef, we're going to be keeping it. I like to say that in general, you want to play a lot faster or a little slower than your opponent, which is exactly why in something like a mirror match, we might be inclined to keep Garen only because we have developed turns. Because we have Cithria, Warchefs, and Fiora already, you can keep Garen. Because keeping slower things allows you to slow down your pace a little bit, and when you're in a situation where you want to go a lot faster or a little slower, and you're in a mirror where you it's a lot easier to go a little slower than a lot faster, right? So keeping Garen in the mirror does end up making a lot of sense there. And the final step is looking at evens or odds. Have you been kind of like thinking about that angle very much, Adam? Whether you're attacking evens or odds?
Thinking about it, but it really confuses me. Like to be completely honest, it's really confusing. It's not something that my Hearthstone brain understands. And it's probably been the most difficult part for me in mulligans. Just knowing I don't know. I guess I'm not thinking enough about like whenever I'm on even or odds. That might be a big thing for me.
Yeah, well, I do think that it will probably only impact minor situations, but I would still recommend, like, step 1, look at the opponent's deck, recognize what archetype they even are, right? And then step 2, decide, like, what your overall game plan is going to be. Should I play very fast or should I try to slow down? Fast just means trying to end the game early with cheap cards. And then step 3 is look at the attack token, and then only after that we think about what cards we actually want to keep and kick, would be the general approach. This first one ended up being like more of a just very basic intro level tutorial. We're going to get into much more complex stuff, but we can just kick the Garen and go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. We can go to the next AI game. And yeah, we'll try a few more of the Demacia Bannerman ones. These I think should end up fairly simple. I mean, as you mentioned, this is pretty much the kind of like the Hearthstone deck, right? Like mostly Bannerman is mulliganing on curve, and that was actually you're almost never going to care what the opponent's playing with a deck like Bannerman. There are a few things that will make you care. There's a few cards that you have that might want to counter certain things. Okay, so again, I actually do think, you know, even though I was the one who said it last time, it's probably a bad habit to even like try to think about what you would kick before you're even looking at the opponent's deck. And of course, these AI don't have meta decks, so we have to kind of like imagine some sort of like meta scenario. So I'll just go ahead and say, okay, imagine we're playing against Burn Aggro. How would you mulligan this?
Against Burn Aggro on the play, I want to prioritize ways in order to combat their early game minions. I've noticed that a really big breakpoint for that deck, I don't know card names, so bear with me, the 2/3 that whenever it survives damage, deals damage
Disciple,
to you and stuff like that. The breakpoint for burn decks is really 3 health, and being able to attack and deal with that kind of stuff is very important. So cards like Single Combat and Fiora have been very impactful in those matchups where you're easily being able to trade into those cards.
Yep. I would definitely, yeah. I mean, the biggest question here, so since we're against Burn and since Grizzled Ranger is no longer OP, Burn is a very aggressive deck. Our game plan is to simply survive, right? So the easiest thing here is to kick Lancer and Ranger. And then the only question remains, do we keep or kick Single Combat? Are we like trying to look for a 2-mana unit, or do we keep it for the ability to kill one of their aggressive cards? And you're opting to keep Single Combat, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yep. And I would probably keep Single Combat here too. It does depend. That's a bit of a closer one because that is arguable. It depends on the exact like version of Bannerman you're playing, but in any sort of like normal Bannerman that's not playing like too many reactive spells and like more unit heavy, like you're not running the very spell heavy versions with like 3 Repost or 2 Rangers Resolve, keeping Single Combat feels really good here.
And whenever you're not on the attack token and your opponent is, do you still prioritize your 1-cost minions in order to try to keep life, or do you try to prioritize maybe your 3 or 4 drops?
You're definitely gonna be keeping life against Bannerman, right? I would say that when you are the kind of like more defensive player of the two, you're never going to be looking at the attack token. Well, I shouldn't say never. It's much more rarely going to be relevant who's on the attack on which turn. It's mostly something that the aggressor needs to ask themselves. So I guess maybe I should amend what I was saying earlier, and instead it should just be step 1, you know, look at the opponent's deck, identify their archetype. Step 2, identify who the aggressor is, and then if you're the aggressor, then it probably only then you really have to think about who's on the attack token on which turn.
Okay. How would you go about mulliganing this hand against maybe per se a slower deck?
Okay, so that's a very good question. Let's go ahead and imagine that instead we are against let's say Deep, right? So pretty standard Deep version that's going to be like playing very, very slowly. I would basically be trying to play very aggressive. So there is a question we always must ask ourselves, which is, okay, so like I said, we want to be playing a lot faster or a little slower. And Deep is a deck that's naturally a little slower than us, which is bad. So whenever you're in that situation, right, like where you're a little faster than them, you have a choice, right? And that's a big choice, which is whether you try to kind of like rush them down and go under them, or whether you actually try to like slow down and try to like match their late game for at least a turn or two that's necessary to kill them, right? And that's one of the single hardest things in mulligans is that specific decision and identifying that key point, right? I actually had one of my games in Twitch Rifles was a game. It was actually a really, really good game. I was playing Bannerman against PokerVax Deep, and I made like a really tough call to go in like aggressively, like really, really, really aggressively. And I think I definitely had to be able to win that match. That was like super, super important. So in this case, you've got Tracker. You're always keeping Tracker in every matchup. That's just like kind of super no-brainer. And you know, we need to be thinking, okay, what's in our deck? Well, we're playing a version that's not running Relentless Pursuits. Some Bannermans are running like 1 or 2 Relentless Pursuits to give them that flexibility. Against Deep, we don't really have the ability to power them down super quick, unless we're on like kind of a nut draw, or unless they're a slower version. The part of the reason I was able to do it against PokerVax was because he was running like the Lure of the Depths version. So usually you actually kind of want to be like matching their late game, and then trying to kill them with Cythria, potentially even after they've played a couple of sea monsters, right? Like you just don't have the ability to rush as Bannerman, which is bad. That's part of the reason that Deep feels comfortable against Bannerman. Because of that, I actually like keeping probably the Grizzled Ranger here over the single combat and the Lancer.
Interesting. Okay.
Honestly, it's that one's a little tough because I'm used to keeping Ranger here because Ranger used to be super busted. It did get like double nerfed, so it's it might be more important to kick it. I think kicking Ranger is actually probably a bit better because it's just less like nuts. Sorry, my instinct was just like, oh, Ranger, we've got to keep it. But yeah, I haven't played a lot of Bannerman since the nerf. Yeah, okay. Yeah. You would probably have to take a full kick here. You're kind of almost inclined to keep Lancer. In an ideal hand, if you had like Tracker, Protector, Fiora, I would probably keep Lancer. Lancer is a really good card for kind of like that turn 5 where you want to be able to sometimes like outvalue them.
Okay, yeah. And I think this was also a pretty good hand in order to kind of analyze the different kind of mulligan strategies for this deck.
Yeah.
It's a lot deeper than just you know, see a curve and play to it. You have to really identify like what your opponent is playing and what you should be playing for.
Exactly.
Yeah. You think we should do one more?
Yeah. Let's roll the hand again. See what we got. Ooh, here we go. Now this we have a much more interesting hand.
Yeah, this hand is, looking at this is very difficult to know what to mulligan and what not to.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw you one. Bannerman Mirror. How would you mulligan this?
Bannerman Mirror. Okay, that's very strange, and this is one of the matchups where being on the attack token actually matters a lot here, because it means I'm going to be able to play a Fiora and use that to my advantage.
Exactly, Fiora on 3 into Chefs.
Right, exactly. So, keeping that in mind, I'm absolutely going to keep the 1-drop and the 3-drop. The cards I'm looking at are Grizzled Ranger and Cythria. As Swim was saying earlier, going fast, or going a lot faster or just a little bit slower than your opponent is very important. And looking at my hand right now, it's making me want to play a lot more faster than my opponent. However, if I can definitely see a world where if I didn't have this Fiora in my hand or something like that, keeping the Cythria might be something that I might want to do later on.
Mm-hmm. So, what's your conclusion? What are you thinking?
For this hand, I think I'm going to mulligan the Grizzled Ranger and the Cythria here and keep the Tracker and the Fiora, just to keep an early game and try to find spells in order to combat the opponent's minions early on.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I would actually keep this entire hand. I wouldn't kick a single thing in the Bannerman Mirror. Okay. Yeah, so the Bannerman Mirror, even like I was saying, most mirrors, rule of thumb, you want to slow down a bit just because you're playing at the same speed, so slowing down a bit gives you the advantage. You have the ability to stabilize with more value. The Bannerman Mirror ends up being the epitome of that, like by far. Tempo definitely can matter, but you do have Fiora on 3 to be able to offset like losing War Chefs. Or, you know, when losing tempo to the opponent's War Chefs by killing it. And that's great, right? Being able to attack with Fiora on 3. But the most important thing is just, like, we have our, like, value and power cards, right? We have Ranger on 4, which we can use on defense. We have Cythria on 6. This kind of hand, I would be looking to keep, like, if this Grizzled Ranger was a Swift Wing Lancer instead, I would probably keep that too. Even though that might even look a little strange as well, because then we don't have a 4 and we don't have a 2, but we're keeping it all. But we're not attacking on evens, so that does matter a little bit less. But also, again, it's just a matchup where it's just like you just want to play for like long-term value. Not to the degree where, you know, we would be making some kicks if we didn't have a made hand already. But because we have our play on 1 and our play on 3, that's good enough for us. Okay. And I think that's... I was just going to say, I think that's one of the most important things mulliganing that you and me kind of intuit since we've played card games for a long time, but many new players might not feel, which is just the idea that, you know, you need to be kicking more aggressively when you don't have your first couple of plays already established, right? You need to make sure you have a play on, you know, 1 or 2 or 3. Depends on the deck you're playing. Like, a lot of decks always skip turn 1 and 2. Of course, they don't need plays then. And aggro decks kind of always need to have a play on 1 and a 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. What were you going to say?
Yeah, one interesting question here, or I guess not even a question, kind of a more observation. Because I'm on the attack token, in a kind of mirror match like this, missing my 2-drop matters a lot less. It allows me to conserve mana and lets me use my reactive spells later on if I draw them.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't know how accurate this is, but from a Hearthstone perspective, having plays on every single turn that I'm attacking that will allow me to trade with my opponent's minions matters a lot more, and wasting my turn 2 doesn't. It isn't actually that significant. It doesn't seem.
Exactly. And that's the Hearthstone mentality is kind of the epitome of this. But even in Magic, like the idea mana efficiency is so ingrained into us as card game players. That's like just always the most important thing. And I really part of what I love about Runeterra is that it manages to defy that in a way that doesn't shatter it. Like it bends without breaking. And that's so important. That's beautiful, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. It makes things a lot more complicated. And I think that's probably where I'm having the most issues, where I don't have to worry about having a 1, 2, 3. I can just have like a 1 and 3 or something like that and be able to use my mana later on, and I'm not just wasting it.
Yep. All right, so, I think that's probably like a good, easy cover of Bannerman. Do you want to pick the next deck?
We should probably start with Deep before we go to Sejuani.
Let's do it. Sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
And the Deep deck does seem a little easier to mulligan for, but we'll see how this goes.
So Bannerman is kind of easy to break down because, like, there are variations of Bannerman, but there's, like, only, like, 4 or so flex slots. Like, almost all Bannerman decks are the same. This Deep deck is fairly standard, but there's still going to be some differences compared to, like, deck to deck. This one's just going to be a pretty standard, like, less greedy version with 2 whales and 2 grasps. Sorry, the police are outside.
Oh.
All right, so, I mean, let's just go ahead and start off. Let's say you are playing against, man, what would be good here? Let's say you're playing against Kinko Elusives.
Kinko Elusives. Okay, so that's a deck I don't have much experience against, but it's just like a early game aggressive elusive deck, right?
Pretty much. They don't tend to actually try to like kill you before like a little later. They're not like super aggressive. But they'll like set up a board and then kill you through yours.
Okay. So the biggest thing for me is I don't really know the health thresholds and these kind of things, but the card that points out to me a lot is Withering Wail as well as Hired Gun. Mm-hmm. Withering Wail being a good card to combat aggressive strategies, healing you, and also dealing damage to enemies. The enemies being elusive in this case makes it a little harder for me to trade into, but looking through the list, they do seem to have pretty low health. It might be able to get me there. And then also the Drag Dredgers. Having something early to play and start progressing your game plan is also pretty important, I think.
Yeah, for the most part with this deck, you're just wanting to keep those 2 things. In almost every deck, the identity of like a 1 mana card or a 1 drop, specifically something you want to turn on, play on turn 1. Not necessarily a 1 mana card. Some 1 mana cards are spells that you don't want to play on turn 1. But a 1 drop is almost always something. Notice I didn't say always, but almost always something you want to keep in your opening hands. And Hired Gun is going to follow that as well. So what are you thinking about Nautilus and Withering Wail?
Going against an aggressive deck, I think keeping Withering Wail might work. Interestingly, I won't be able to cast it until turn 4 with this hand, because we do have a 1 and a 2. Mm-hmm. And Nautilus, I don't think is a good keep. I typically like to search for the 6 mana 4/4 that eats something. So I think I would probably ship the Nautilus.
Okay, and you're keeping Wail?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, and that's solid. That's exactly what I would do here. Against an aggressive deck, I would say, like, the most important thing, as I like to say, like, even if this deck was a little bit different, I guess there's definitely, like, a better exception to really, like, drive this home, and we'll hit those later, but against aggro, you basically need to just abandon your own deck's game plan. It depends on the kind of aggro it is. But for the most part, like, when you're playing against aggro, you're just abandoning your normal game plan and just playing to stay alive. Because if you can out-survive them, you end up just winning the game, right?
Yeah, for sure. You just have such a stronger late game than them. If you can survive with a healthy life total, you're able to value trade and get in there.
Yep. All right, so yeah, we can... I think this is actually just too straightforward of a hand. We can just actually re-roll to a new hand.
Okay, sure.
Because Deep actually does have some fairly interesting hands. I think one of the things to note about Deep is that you do want to mulligan somewhat passively, because there's a lot of cards that are just very bad for you to hit early. Like, you have so much top end and Deep. So an example of that might be, I don't know, like, for maybe like
honestly,
keeping cards like Grasp in matchups where they're just kind of like lukewarm.
Yeah. especially because like there's so many bricks in your deck, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You just like I've had games with this deck. It feels really bad whenever you're mulliganing more than like 2 cards, because whenever you start doing that, you find you're just like having a card that you can play, even if it's suboptimal, is better than having a 9-drop in your hand that's going to sit there and rot. Like, to me, mulliganing there and drawing that is just worse than mulliganing at all.
Yeah. All right, this is a great hand.
Yeah, this is actually a really
I'm going to throw you a fast one, Deep Mirror. What do you think? Let's go.
Deep Mirror? All right, Deep Mirror, I know...
It's a rough hand here.
Yeah, actually, this hand's pretty rough now I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
In a Deep Mirror, I know you're trying to... You know, you don't really give a shit about the early game. You're not doing anything there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to keep cards that progress your game plan as fast as possible. Cards like Jettison and Salvage are great here.
Yeah.
I don't know about the Abyssal Eye at all, and I think I'm keeping the Maokai.
Yeah.
Maokai with no creatures in order to, you know, activate it is kind of bad, but it's one of the only proactive plays you have in the mirror.
Yep.
So I think here I'm only mulliganing Abyssal Eye in the mirror match.
Yeah, and that's a good call. That's what I would do. That's kind of what you have to do in the Deep Mirror. You just have to try to like outgreed. And again, it's just like pretty much every mirror match just comes down to this idea of, well, let's outgreed them a little bit, right? We can tank some HP. They're not going to put out so much aggression, so it's okay having cards that would otherwise be bad. I think a lot of players would mess up this mulligan. Like probably like a lot of players might go for like a full mull or something here. At the end of the day, you don't really... There are some hands where they can like draw like an aggro draw and you can brick out and they can kill you, but that would be pretty rare. For the most part, you just want to make sure you are reaching your deep condition before them, and if you draw some dredgers and wanderers, that's a bonus on top of that.
Sure. How about this hand in like an aggressive matchup? I have a very hard time mulliganing deep against aggressive decks.
Right. No, that one is quite rough. What do you think? Let's say we should define the deck because they really do matter. Let's say burn aggro.
Burn aggro. Okay. So burn aggro, kind of weird. Like, oh gosh, actually, how would I mulligan this against?
Yeah, it's hard.
It is really hard. I think the Abyssal Eye always goes in that matchup.
Mm-hmm.
The card I'm really looking at is Maokai. I don't know how effective Maokai is in that kind of matchup. He is really fat, so I think he survives, and he probably saves you some life. But I don't know if saving life is the important part in that matchup, or if progressing your game plan is. I think I would probably keep the Maokai, and keeping the Salvage and Jettison are good, because those are the 2 cards that get us too deep as fast as possible, I think. But yeah, I don't know. Actually, let me hear your input on this, actually.
I'm like snapping a full kick here. Snap all four out 100%. At the end of the day, it's like against burn, like the most of the most aggressive. Deep kind of doesn't really matter. It's like you're just either alive or you're dead, right? There's kind of nothing else. So like getting to deep or stuff like Jettison and Salvage, they're not really going to help your cause. Maokai is definitely too slow there as well. You just need to be drawing into, if you draw into any like early drops, like anything but any unit you can play between 1 and 3 is good. Wanderer is great because it has the heal. Withering Will, Vile Feast, and Grasp are good. You actually do have a lot of hits for this, right?
Okay. So contrary to like a mid-range matchup where you don't want a full mulligan, that kind of, I think what you're trying to say here, tell me if I'm wrong, is that it's a very bad matchup traditionally, so you just want to up your chances as much as possible by drawing the haymakers in the matchup, and you don't really care about drawing a 9-drop and that card not being useful anyways. Like you were saying earlier, you were saying that whenever you're the slower deck, like especially significantly slower, you just kind of have to give up your game plan and try to survive.
Right, exactly, because you want to be a lot faster or a little slower. So when you find yourself so much slower than them, you need to abandon everything to just speed up so that you don't just die. And that just involves. Why don't we kick all of these here and just to see what we get? Why not?
Sure. Okay.
I mean, it's not going to make a difference because obviously the outcome doesn't affect the play. But yeah, this is fine. So overall, like, even if we hit... Well, obviously, this is kind of a dream hand. But even if we had only hit, like, 2 playables out of these 5 cards, that's still, like, worth it. Like, even if the other 2 cards in our hand are, like, Devourer and Terror. Because at the end of the day, like, Salvage and Jettison are just as unplayable as Devour and Terror. It's exactly like you were saying. Like, the difference between, like, a 6-mana card and a 9-mana card in this matchup doesn't matter. Because they're just going to kill you before both anyway.
Yeah, both of them don't get cast.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think we covered D pretty well.
Yeah, that actually felt pretty thorough.
Yeah.
So, I've been playing this deck on ladder a lot.
Yeah.
I really like this deck, and this deck has been very hard to mulligan for. So this is the Water Sejuani deck. Yeah. So the biggest thing for me in this deck, so I can kind of give some explanation, is I don't know, like cards with plunder. I don't know if I'm supposed to care for the activators. Warning Shot, for example, I don't know if that's a keep or something like that. Okay. So I think that this will actually be pretty helpful.
Yeah, oh, that's a very good question. So obviously we have to be thinking about what this matchup is. We're just gonna go with like pretty easy stuff. I would say for the most part, you kind of the sort of like aggro triangles is a little weird right now, but the biggest thing is just like different speeds that the opponent's deck is playing at, right? Let's go ahead and say deep. Let's mulligan this versus deep.
Okay, so deep is one of those decks that plays so slowly that I feel like you want to use the early game of this deck to the best of your advantage. They don't have a lot of good plays that, or they don't have a lot of good early drops that can contest your board very well. So I want to try to keep at least a pretty good curve of at least a 1 into 3, and then I really want to be searching for Misfortune, and cards like Island Navigator are great here as well in order to activate that Misfortune. I want to try to get under them.
Okay, so what's that kick going to look like?
I think you can probably keep everything except one of the 1-drops. I think that you want to kick one of the 1-drops here. And I think that's probably Jagged Butcher.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. So, yeah, there's a few different arguments here. So you're saying keep Omen, Pilfered, and Island Navigator?
Yes.
Okay, I would kick Navigator and Pilfered, and I would keep Omen and Butcher, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, Navigator... Again, it sort of comes down to, like, the difference between having a made hand or not, right? It's like, right now we have a hand that doesn't necessarily have strong plays on 2 or 3. That's a big downside, especially since we're attacking on 3. So, like, the idea of, like, a turn 4 play is a little kind of like, it's not going to be able to attack until 5. Very slow. We really just want to get the opponent as down as far as possible before that. If we had a Misfortune already, then we might be looking to keep the Navigator, although that still depends on the rest of our hand. But as you mentioned, we're attacking on odds, so Misfortune is definitely a good hit. We want to try to hit her. So Navigator's out because of that. Pilfered Goods is also a very slow card, since it's just like a draw card. And most of the cards we're drawing from the opponent's deck are going to be slow cards, right? And that's kind of like, that's not even, that wouldn't be necessarily unique to deep either, because like whenever you're looking to go fast, it's because your opponent's running a slow deck, so drawing their cards is always going to be slow cards. And of course, as you're aware, the fundamental idea of drawing cards is in and of itself slow, right? Because it takes more turns, more mana to be able to get the value out of a draw card, right? Pilfered Goods kind of more so plays for this deck's side plan of sometimes like going a little bit later and not running out of steam. But also on top of that,
it's evaluating that. Yeah. Okay.
On top of that, it's a kind of like combo piece on Merchant. I actually, like, even in slower matchups, I pretty much never keep Goods unless I already have Merchant in the hand. Because like, you know, you can keep Merchant without Goods. Merchant's kind of the core, and once you have like even one Merchant, then Goods becomes very good, but without it, a lot less so. And in this case, because Butcher has like the Plunder, he's not reliant on playing on turn 1 to be good. So like if we kick Goods and Navigator, we've got Omen on 1, we, you know, hit a swing, and we'll be able to find a room for Butcher on like 2 or 3, and that should do this matchup very well.
So a little bit of analyzation on where I was wrong here. This actually totally makes a lot of sense. I think I was valuing the Plunder a little too highly here. Instead of just trying to get a good curve here.
Yeah.
So I think it. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I see that. Yeah.
So then, you know, here's an interesting question. So let's say we are playing the Mirror.
Okay.
What then?
So the Mirror, we want to be going a little slower, and oh gosh, yeah, this is where I'm just having a lot of complications.
This one's actually harder.
Yeah, this seems pretty difficult, yeah. I know that we're keeping Omen Hawk. I think you're probably right on getting rid of the Island Navigator because of what you said, how we're attacking first. It makes the card a little bit worse. I don't know if the Pilfered Goods is right or wrong here. We don't have the Navigator in order to make it, or not the Navigator, the
Black Market Merchant, yeah.
The Merchant, in order to make it have more value. But it is fine because we are trying to go a little bit slower because it is like a mid-range matchup. But I do think that I don't think our hand is made enough. I think we would probably have to mulligan Pilfered Goods and Island Navigator and keep the rest of it.
So the same mulligan.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So I would keep the butcher because even though, you know, as we mentioned, we do want to play a little bit slower in these kinds of situations. There's a lot of mirror matches against like sort of mid-rangey decks that would kick the superfluous one drop, in this case the butcher. In this case, I think keeping it is pretty solid just because a 3/3 stat line does very well into the mirror matchup. They have a lot of like 2-attack units and stuff like Misfortune that it can potentially like make awkward. And it's just nice having it early as well. The one I would kick Navigator as well, but the one consideration is in the mirror. I definitely might be looking to potentially keep Pilfered Goods. You know, you're getting a lot of value cards there, and the mirror does run Omen Hawk, right? So if you hit a situation where, you know, you're able to like Pilfered Goods, even without Merchant, if you hit like the Omen Hawk value, you're good. And of course, you know, as always, you're incentivized to slow a bit down in mirrors in general as a rule of thumb. So I would kick Navigator but keep the goods in the mirror.
Okay. And so just for knowledge here, keeping the butcher and the Omen Hawk, you're stating that the butcher is going to be good as a as like a 3/3 to block and stuff like that. The only time that we're going to be able to activate Plunder is on our turn 3. Are you not concerned about that jeopardizing our curve or playing any 3-drops that we might draw? And even if the Omen Hawk's going to be able to get in there to do Plunder damage.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely might be a little awkward. It's not a guaranteed 3/3, right? Like, there will be many games that it'll play out without being able to hit a 3/3. But one of the issues with this deck is that it can have a lot of, like, sort of 2 late game bombs that allow you to fall behind, right? So, you know, if you're hitting a lot of the top end, like Riptide or Citrus, if you're running Citrus, then that can be a little dicey. It is close. I would say out of that mulligan, that like keeping the butcher is like the one thing that's very arguable. Like, you can kick the butcher, especially since you have the goods and you're looking for the merchant too. That's a really, really arguable spot. I think that it ends up being actually a little bit safer overall to kick the butcher, not necessarily better, but yeah, I mean, it just comes down to your odds of being able to trigger the plunder, which I find that you can usually do in these sorts of hands with like Warning Shot or Make It Range, or even like potentially Misfortune, but
yeah. Okay, and then another question, just because a card I've been having a really hard time with knowing or prioritizing, I guess, is Sejuani. I don't know how you know right this would be, but in a mid-range matchup where we're trying to go a little bit slower, what if this Island Navigator was a Sejuani? Would we even consider keeping that? Is that something we're interested in at all?
It could be. It like depending on your hand. If you kind of have like a made hand, I tend to not like keeping Sejuani. It's definitely something you could consider in the right hand. I don't know if this would be the hand for it. Okay. I think it would be kind of mutually exclusive with Pilfered Goods. You would keep like one or the other, but not both, because both might be a little too like, you know, at that point you're playing a little too slow, and then you risk like falling behind. But if you have a hand that's like a bit better for keeping Sejuani, if you're, for example, attacking on turn 6, is that like I will say if I'm attacking odds, I probably just don't keep Sejuani. Like, maybe in a rare hand, but if I'm attacking odds in the mirror, I pretty much just wouldn't do it. If I'm attacking evens in a hand, I would definitely potentially do it. Yeah.
Okay. You want to move on from this hand? Try out another one, maybe.
Yeah. Let's run one more hands with the Sejuani deck.
Plunder innately as a mechanic makes mulligans pretty difficult.
Yes.
I don't know. I have a hard time doing that. Also, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I think you always go first versus AI. So that might be something we want to consider. We've had 9 mulligans in a row going first.
That's those odds are getting kind of stacked. What's 9? Is that 512?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot at that point.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Why don't we just start talking both if we had the token or not?
Yeah. I think that's probably fine as well. So, you know, let's go ahead and break this one down from the position. You know what? Let's say we're playing against Heimer Vi. We haven't talked about Heimer Vi yet.
Okay, good point. Yeah. So that deck is so from what I can tell, it's a mid-range deck, but it also plays it plays a lot on answers. It tries to always answer what your opponent is playing. So for me, I don't know. in that matchup, I think it's actually pretty interesting. Heimer Vi gets a lot of value off of being able to cast 2 cards in a turn, and I think a really important part about that is making sure those cards aren't just being wasted. Like a
Yeah.
Mystic Shot to the face is kind of like wasting a card. So I think in the like thinking that both of us are mid-range decks and I can also play pretty slowly with this kind of plunder stealing cards kind of mechanic, I think I want to not prioritize an early game and maybe toss up their hand a little bit, having cards like Get Excited and Mystic Shot stuck in their hand, and I think instead I might want to prioritize the late game in that kind of matchup. So,
yeah, and just being able to potentially flip Sejuani.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for that kind of idea, we do have 2 Sejuanis in the stand, so it is a little it's a little janky. We're definitely mulliganing one of those at least, and I think on the attack token we're probably mulliganing the other,
and then keeping the Black Market Merchant and Butcher.
I think so, yeah. It does kind of counteract what I was saying about trying to play a slower game, but I think that whenever we have the Black Market Merchant in our hand, it does allow us to set up.
It's just a power card. It's just good no matter what.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's right, and I think that is kind of the exclusion of that kind of mentality and game plan.
All right. So here I would double kick Sejuani, snap on odds. I think I would do it on evens too. So to touch on what you're saying, we are again kind of in that exact situation that we were as Bannerman against Deep, which is we've got an opponent that's probably a little slower than us overall. So we're sort of like trapped in the dilemma. Do we try to like rush them, or do we go slow? This is probably the single most like timing based decision, and it's very common in mulligans that you'll have to like literally already be thinking about this. And the way that a lot of decks that kind of like play for a tempo flex condition like this deck do this, but Plunder embodies it, which is the idea of kind of like taking a stab and flexing for the ability to slow down depending on how the plays turn out, right? The reason Plunder is good at this is because, when you're dealing damage to face, you're also potentially drawing cards off of Merchant and Pilfered Goods, but also setting up your Sejuani tokens to flip, right? So you kind of want to always start playing this aggressive. If you have the ability, if you're against an opponent that you can just like aggro down, which is like something you can do in this matchup that is a lot harder to do in, for example, the mirror, right? You don't really have the ability to do this in the mirror, but against this matchup, they very easily can draw hands that don't allow them to do very much early. Sorry, my dog is getting a little excited. So what I would say is that you do want to start playing aggressively and see if it works out or not, right?
Okay.
And then, by the time you're deciding like on turn 4, on turn 5 about whether you kind of want to make that last push really fast or start slowing down, you'll have the options in your hand, right? You'll have, even if we kick Sejuani's here, you might have the third Sejuani by then, or more likely you'll have just more of your draw cards.
And I think that's a pretty good analysis of that. I agree with that, yeah. Any other matchups we want to talk about with this hand? This hand also seems kind of linear, honestly.
Yeah, I think so. I do think like we've kind of broken down this deck as much as we can. Like it's on a basic level at least. You can always go deeper. Yeah. But yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with that. Oh yeah, there is one last thing, which is like some of the warning shot hands.
Oh yeah. Do you want to try to mulligan for one of those?
Yeah, let's just go for a third one and see what happens there, because those kinds of hands are sort of weird. All right. Well, look at that. How did we do that? We hit the hand.
Oh, that's crazy.
Perfect. All right. So let's say Bannerman Mid Range. What are you thinking?
Sure. So against a mid range matchup like Bannerman, I think Bannerman is probably going to be a little faster than we are. Mm-hmm. Just they have better 1-drops and 2-drops and stuff like that for this kind of matchup. Yeah. So because of that, I think that we need to try to just survive, which means that we want to mulligan for our cheaper minions, our stuff like Hired Gun and stuff like that, Open Hawk, Jagged Butcher, and stuff like that. I think those are a lot more important than any sort of like plunder kind of cheatsy stuff.
Okay.
We're trying to stay alive, so I think that we're probably going to mulligan the Black Market Merchant. Honestly, I think I'd probably full toss it and try to look for cheaper minions and stuff to fight for board.
All right, yeah, that's quite interesting. I think a lot of players might actually full toss this, My perspective on this might actually be a little skewed. I would probably keep the black market merchant.
Okay.
One of the principles of mulliganing is that when you are keeping some specific combo pieces, there's some cards in your hand that will increase the value of a redraw or an out, right? And black market merchant gives you like 5 outs that hit hard, the 2 other merchants, and the 3 pilfered goods. Because even with like a small combo, you can kind of like, you know, you'll usually have a bit of survivability in the early positions, as well as like, you know, all you need to do is play like merchant into pilfered goods on turn 4, and you're good to just like outlast them until your Sejuani flips. I actually think that the early survivability is usually less of an issue, with this deck at least. You have plenty of early game draws. It's less of an issue than the sort of like mid game where you're just like running out of steam before your Sejuani flips. That's kind of like the biggest problem here, which is like, you know, they have a board, they're about to jam like a Cithria, and you're sort of like lower on options. You're still a few turns away from Sejuani flipping. That sort of like region. And I really like keeping merchant. It's very flexible. And the more kicks you're doing, the better it is to keep merchant, basically. That's kind of like the way to explain it. When you have combo pieces that you're keeping in hand, it is more valuable to kick other things, but the logical opposite also applies. When you know you're kicking other things, it's also more valuable to keep something like black market merchant in your hand. If you draw something like second merchant, you're pretty made. Like, especially if you hit a pilfered goods any of the next like 6 draws, that's like basically game shattering. If you draw, you know, the first goods, which is like pretty likely, you have like a nice restabilizer hand on turn 4.
I'm seeing that now. I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. If this, however, was a slower deck, if this was like a more stally Bilgewater deck that had problems dealing with Bannerman's early game, that would be something along the lines of maybe like a sort of like Dreadway style deck with either Shadow Isles or PNZ, where you happen to be using the Yoink package as well. At that point, I might be looking to kick the black market merchant, right? Like, those decks have answers to Cithria, and they're like, the early game is actually like one of your lose conditions, and like it's kind of risky because we don't know what our 3 cards are, so we do want a stabilizer, and that's where I would kick the merchant.
In matchups where you need to try to conserve your life total, is there ever a world where we just play black market merchant as like a 2-mana 2/2 if we don't find any synergy for it, or we can't get under them in order to get plunder value? Like, for me, myself, I know I have a hard time trying to hold on to stuff for value, so I just don't know if that kind of thing is valid. I guess it kind of is a hard question to answer, honestly.
I think I would basically never do that. The biggest thing about this is like spell mana, right? The only reason you would even think about doing it is if you were full on spell mana. So that would be like Hyper Brick hand, it's turn 3, you're looking at 6 mana, about to burn 3, and you have the ability to play effective 0 mana 2/2, right?
Yeah.
And
there's the Hearthstone brain coming in, I think.
Exactly. That's kind of what I'm like. The most important perspective is that as long as it's going to spell mana, it's totally fine. And one of the big things for you, Hayden, is to be able to think, do I have a spell in hand that can actually use this spell mana? That's going to be one of the bigger things. Sometimes, like, in a tempo deck that's a little light on spells, you'll often just be looking at, you know, let's say you're in Bannerman, your only spell in hand is a single combat. You do want to avoid putting a 3rd point of mana into spell mana, actually. That can definitely be a thing. If you're deciding your curve, like, you don't always want to be comfortable going into spell mana in a deck that's either light on spells or you only have 1 spell in hand and it's a cheap spell. Then sometimes you only want to put 1 or 2 points in spell mana, and any more than that is actually bad. But in any normal circumstance, you're very happy just having like spell mana and normal mana being almost the same thing.
So a lot less to think about here in mulligans.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay.
Well, maybe not.
I will say, mulliganing in Magic and Hearthstone with the aggressive decks is a lot more difficult. But yeah, actually, why did I say this was going to be easier? That makes absolutely no sense. All right. Yeah, aggressive decks. Mulligans are actually the most important part of any aggressive deck.
Yeah.
It is, you see less cards in a normal game. You have less mana and less resources to deal with, so the cards in your hand matter a lot more.
Exactly. Decisions are just tighter across the board.
Exactly, yeah. How do you value the cards like Imperial Demolitionist and like Transfusion and that kind of stuff? The cards that require you to Like
For value, you want Disciple.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, it's kind of as you would expect. You would only keep those cards in your opening hand if you also had Disciple.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
This is actually. Yeah, this is a super straightforward hand. It's like the triple kick, keep Teemo.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can reshuffle, hit a slightly more interesting hand.
Sure.
I think there's going to be some that will be actually matchup dependent. There are, I would say, a surprising amount of hands where I keep Static Shock, and I think that's something that a lot of bad burn players would never do, and that's a big weakness I see. It's just like the lack of the ability to like slow it down in some hands and some matchups.
Yeah, go for it.
Let's say you're playing against They Who Endure.
They Who Endure. Okay. So a Shadow Isles deck. Okay.
Yeah.
So
an interesting point, by the way, is like we haven't covered this, but when you see They Who Endure, you can't really tell if it's like the aggro version or the kind of more like mid-range stally version. So
that is kind of
weird.
Yeah.
You have to think about that during the mulligan is like the odds of both.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that comes with a lot of experience, of which I don't have any. So
but you have all that card game veteranship.
Yeah. How would you evaluate that? How would you evaluate? What do you expect there? Do you just plan for the worst, or how do you mulligan in that kind of idea?
Oh, well, it kind of just depends on what's popular in the ladder. It's like you just have a general idea of like what's seeing more play. Right now in Masters, I would expect like the aggro tempo version to be in like 75-80% of decks, whereas like the mid-range, not necessarily even because it's better. It's just like people are playing it right now. It's kind of new. It's an interesting direction for the deck to take in.
Okay, so against the They Who Endure deck, as Swin said, you're expecting them to be a little bit more aggressive, which means they're going to have the They Who Endure deck's a little interesting, right? They're a pretty big board control deck. They have a bunch of cards that are pretty fine with just like suiciding themselves, a bunch of challenger minions, try to get rid of their stuff in order to buff up their They Who Endure. There, I feel like minions that are very squishy are a lot less useful. You want to, I think if I saw They Who Endure, I would probably want to mulligan the Legion Grenadier. And I don't actually know about the Decimate and if that's a card you ever keep. So I'd actually like some input on that one there.
Okay, yeah. I pretty much would never keep Decimate. I think I have yet to keep Decimate in a hand with Burn. I keep Static Shock in a decent amount of positions. Decimate tends to be sort of like, it's sort of trapped between two extremes where like Static Shock does end up sort of a little better for your over the top positioning. I think that I would keep Decimate in some hands if it was a matchup that went on for quite a while and I already had a made hand. As always, when you're thinking about keeping like something that costs 4, 5, or 6 mana, unless your deck is built around that, even then, you should only do it if you already have a made hand. Made hand means early developmental plays already there, basically. So even if you have like Teemo, Boom Crew, and Crimson Disciple, like you can think about keeping Decimate, but you would only do it if then your opponent was also on like a specific matchup at that point, like Shadow Isles. I probably wouldn't keep Decimate now. And you're saying you'd also kick Grenadier against They Who Endure?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I like it. That's exactly what I would do here. Grenadier is actually almost always a kick with this deck. Almost always.
That card kind of sucks.
Yeah, you want the card to come in late. Its 1 health stat line is in almost every matchup. Its 1 health stat line just makes it bad. Like one mana 1/1s are so common right now in the meta. You know, there's a lot of things that will just kill it incidentally, like Withering Wail. That like it's not even like forcing out any specific removal, it's just dying alongside things. It's good to draw into later as like a little bit of reach, but it's not something you want early. And this deck really feeds off of its like power openers. This deck needs to mulligan semi-aggressively because you're really feeding off of Crimson Disciple. And historically Rookie, although Rookie's less nuts now.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me.
So what about Demacia here?
So Demacia is going to be a slower deck, but unfortunately they do play for the board, which is bad for us.
Yes.
That means that we want to try to find cards that cheat and allow us to kill their minions unfairly. Cards like Transfusion and Static Shock, stuff like that allow us to surprise our opponent and get rid of their minions before they get value off of trading ours is a lot more important. A curve is also exceptionally important here, so I think I would do the exact same mulligans for that kind of matchup as well.
All right. I would keep Grenadier in that matchup. That's one of the few
would?
matchups that doesn't have great ways to punish like the 1 health stat line. And it can actually like make some things awkward for the opponent. You know, sometimes it goes something like Tracker into Teemo. Their War Chefs can't have the ability to attack without like the Grenadier potentially blocking. There's some like, you know, Fiora hands where it just has the ability to actually do things with the 3-1 stat line just because of how that matchup stat lines often go into it.
Gotcha. Okay.
And like
So
you
really,
said, kind of like
yeah.
playing a bit for the board is a bit better.
Yeah, I think a really big thing that a lot of players, including myself, need to learn are the health breakpoints of matchups.
Yeah.
When cards matter.
Yeah.
You know, there's matchups where stuff like Mystic Shot for early game removal doesn't matter because their minions are 1/3s. Like, for example, this match.
You want to know a secret? Mystic Shot always sucks for early game removal.
It always sucks for early game
well,
removal.
I'm exaggerating, but like, it's kind of an overrated card. I don't know.
I can actually definitely see that.
It sounds like a hot take to say that. I think there's a lot of people that think that card is like hyper auto include. Like I've seen people saying it needs a nerf, and in the past maybe that has been the case. But even like since a very, very long time ago, there have been people that have been like, you know, doing some amount of cuts on like Mystic Shots, and I'm not saying I wouldn't necessarily bring 3 of it, but it's a card that is more cuttable than people think. It's not, you know, like when you look at it from the, like, most of what it does is over the top. There's very few things in this meta that actually like feel bad to 2 damage removal. Like it's like Zed and Lucian, and that's actually like kind of it.
Really.
Dead Bloom Wanderer, sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I feel like the difference between 1 and 2 is very insignificant, and the difference between 2 and 3 is really significant.
Yeah.
I think that Get Excited does so much more than Mystic Shot, and I feel like a card like Static Shot is very comparable to Mystic Shot.
Yeah.
For that same kind of reason.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And again, you know, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just like it's a solid card. It's just good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that pretty much rounds it out. Like I feel pretty comfortable with like kind of like how we've covered everything here. A lot of it just comes down to like, you know, as I was saying, like just to kind of recap, you know, you really want to be, before you're even thinking about your own cards, you want to be doing the steps. That's kind of like the number 1 rule. Look at your opponent's regions, think what kind of deck they are. You know, are they aggro? Are they mid range? Are they control? Are they combo? Right? And then, you know, who's the aggressor? Am I going to have to start playing this fast or playing this slow? One thing I didn't touch on here, and this is actually very important, which is that the aggression in the match is not actually necessarily always dictated by the matchup. Sometimes you will have a flexible deck that draws a really aggressive hand, and then you're like, wow, I'm the aggressor here. Or you'll have, you know, a matchup that your opponent's drawing a brick hand and you're like, okay, I'm just going to go in, right? That sort of thing. Now, this usually doesn't apply to the mulligan. It usually is sort of the things that will affect the decisions in the first several turns of the game. But it also can apply to the mulligan. Sometimes you'll draw a hand with like 2 or 3 cards. Like, you're playing Shadow Isles. They who endure a flexible deck. Okay? Your mulligan comes down, Keeper Butcher, XX, right? Suddenly, you're like, wow, I'm aggressive. Maybe I even have token on 2. This is all pre-mulligan decision, that all of this information you have. You're attacking on 2, you have Keeper Butcher. So your XX is like Neverglade Caretaker, and you're suddenly thinking, I've got an aggressive drop hand here. I could really just go in. Maybe my opponent's matchup can't deal with it super well. Honestly, there's not really any matchup that can deal with Keeper Butcher on 2. So it's just like, suddenly I'm like, yeah, this is informing my mulligan. Maybe I'll kick Neverglade Collector. It's not going to happen super often, but it's something to keep in mind that hand states can actually dictate the idea of the aggression you should be taking. Only, of course, cards you keep in your hands, right?
Yeah.
Then, of course, we've got kind of like one of the most important rules is trying to make sure that we're kind of like only considering later things if we have a made hand. You really need to be, you know, and I know you know this, Hayden, I'm really talking to everyone else. But it's super important in all card games, like, you know, if you have some early plays that are good enough for the matchup that you need them, and good enough for your deck's role in that matchup, then you can think about keeping things that cost like 4, 5, 6 mana. Probably wouldn't go later. Well, sometimes you go to 7. Sometimes like deep, you would keep Nautilus in kind of like a slower matchup, maybe like Mirror, but only if you already have a couple of early plays, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's gonna happen really commonly, actually. So you want to be thinking about, the 4s, 5s, and 6s when you have the early drops. That's very matchup dependent. There's, for example, if you're against Burn, you're jonesing for a 1-drop. You need to get control early. So, decks might have to kick a little bit more aggressively. Whereas, kind of like, I guess, most average matchups, if you have a 2 and a 3, that's fine. You can start thinking about keeping later things. You don't necessarily need a 1, so think about it in terms of the matchup. And then kind of like the final point we touched on here is to think about combo pieces and outs. There's certain cards that are more valuable if you're kicking more things, and those are going to be the combo pieces. That's like Cursed Keeper and Crimson Disciple are kind of like 2 big examples of that. Anything that's kind of looking for another card to feed out. Black Market Merchant, like a card that's powerful on its own. It's really important, by the way. I mentioned Merchant, Keeper, and Disciple. Even though these cards all are part of their own individual combos, I'm not mentioning Butcher, Demolitionist, or Pilfered Goods. The reason for that is because there's a difference between like the core card and the extension card, right? It's like there's the power card of the combo, and then there's the side card that is good if it hits the combo, right? Like Black Market Merchant is good without Pilfered Goods, but Pilfered Goods isn't as good without Black Market Merchant, right?
Exactly.
Basically. So that's kind of a very important thing. So if you're keeping stuff like Keeper or Disciple or Black Market Merchant, it does incentivize you to mulligan your other things a bit more aggressively. And the contrary is true. If you're kicking aggressively, it could incentivize you to keep those kinds of cards. Yep, and that's I guess that's basically it for all I had to say. Do you have anything to say, Hayden?
Yeah, I mean, just a short thing to mention. It's very hard to make kind of mulligan strategy guides and these kinds of things. Speaking in absolutes will always, hinder your development as a player. Really take this as a suggestion, try to learn from it, take our key points and our fundamentals, more importantly than the actual card choices, I feel.
Yes. Yeah, super. Yeah, that's really, really important. Yeah, exactly. And that's why, people have been asking for, mulligan guides and mulligan tips for so long, and it's kind of impossible to do without just doing examples and talking about the logic. Like that, you've touched on exactly why that is. It's just because, there's so many exceptions and so many things going on under the surface that will inform whether a mulligan is good or not. I think it's one of the most skill-intensive things in the game, and like I mentioned at the start, I think it's, really great that Runeterra's mulligan is even kind of pushes it past the normal card game, because in normal card games there's a lot of skill impression in the mulligan, but a lot of it in a lot of situations does boil down to curve more than it would in Runeterra because of the spell mana system.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating how different this mulligan system is for another game. I've always played mid-range decks in the games that I play, and coming into this game, the one thing I was not expecting to have difficulties with was mulligans.
Yeah.
And it's actually found to be the thing that I've had the hardest time doing, just because of spell mana and refreshing mana systems. It's so unique and interesting,
All right, but yeah, that's gonna be this little mulligan kind of guide / coaching session. I don't know. It's just mulligan helping people get up to speed on their mulligans. I think it'll be super helpful. I wish I could do this shorter. It's like an hour-long video. I guess you know that because you've made it to this point. But there's no way to do it shorter. There's no quick tips really. That's the thing. So it kind of had to be
show examples. Yeah.
Right. And it's complex, but hopefully if you've made it this far, it should help you guys quite a bit, because this is definitely, I think, the number one. People always ask me what's the number one tip to get to Masters, and this I don't know if I would say this is the number one, but it's at the very least top 2 or 3. It might be the number one. So yeah, go try this out in your own games, and hopefully you'll have better games because of it. All right, that's gonna be it for me, guys. Peace out.